we can just do you first, and then we'll do you second.
Now, incidentally, you're going to need to go and spend some time photographing the situation at Dawn's house.
Sure, we can do that too after this.
Because her situation is much more striking.
Okay.
If you can see that trailer
Yep.
down there, that wall behind it,
Yep.
that wall walled me off.
Okay.
My house is right by it. The road's
Okay.
like 40 foot from my bedroom.
Okay. We can
That
we can
is-
So
go.
that's
we
definitely
can,
what you need to get
Okay.
some pictures
We
of
can-
because it shows something that should have never happened, and
Sure.
I'm hoping it never happened to anybody else.
Okay,
Because
absolutely. So after we're done with this, we can go over there, whatever you want to do. I mean, it's up to you all. Like,
I said if it had to happen, I'm glad it's me because I am deaf. Because these guys with their hearing, they hear this like crazy.
Sure.
And those trucks constantly would drive them insane.
Sure.
I mean, when I have folks at the house that hear right, they're like, how do you live with this? I'm like, remember, I can't hear it. And if I trip, I
the
take
truth.
my ears out
We
at
met a
night.
woman yesterday, the one that was in Cheyenne, that was 600. She had a well 600 feet from her house, and she basically said her mom was geriatric, really sick, older, like in her 80s or 90s, and she thinks that her mom passed away sooner because all the noise kept her awake and she didn't sleep, got all stressed out.
Right.
And this was just basically because they were fracking.
Yeah, it can be stress-inducing. This is, in fact, they're projecting that they will be completed with the drilling, round numbers, June 10.
Sure.
So that's like 3 weeks.
Okay.
So they're very close to it. They started in early December, and so it's been ongoing for some time. But the drilling will be complete here within about 3 weeks.
Okay.
And then fracking will take place after that.
Sure. Okay, I guess we can just start real quick.
Sure.
This is really informal. We try to make it pretty easy. So the first question that I'll ask, Kev, do you want to do this separately, or do you want to do it the same video? It doesn't necessarily matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter here.
Okay, we'll just do it. We'll just kind of have you both just kind of popcorn back and forth, and
Okay.
we'll just transcribe it. However, it's not that hard. So the first question, just to kind of establish who you are, where you're from, all that kind of stuff. So like, just give a little bit of background that you want to share about yourself, and then and then I'll ask some more questions. But that's like the opening question. Like, just say your name, essentially, where you're from,
Okay.
and your background, whatever you want to share.
Okay. So my name is Lowell Lewis. I'm going to be 70 this year. And we moved, my wife and son and I moved here from Connecticut in 1985. And we've lived in Greeley in 2 different homes since that time. We built our first home and we bought here. We moved here about 11 years ago. And when we moved to this place, the thing that sold it was that. I mean, it's a pasture. And while we were both still employed, we'd wake up on Saturday mornings and the cows would be grazing right there and they'd be mooing, and it was just the coolest thing on 4 feet. It was really, really nice. So the view here, in the winter, the leaves are down there. You've got a good view of the Rockies, and it's just a huge pasture here. So that was a big selling point in us getting this house.
Sure.
We bought our place about 32 years ago.
Okay.
And when we bought, none of these subdivisions were here.
Okay.
I mean, this was all country. In fact, our friends all said, why are you moving halfway to Loveland? They thought we were just moving way out of town. It was dirt roads, big rock dirt clods. We were in the county. So it was county maintained road. So I've seen a lot of growth, which has been great. I mean, because I get people like this. But this has been, oh my God, this has just been a nightmare from the very beginning. From the very first public meeting they had with us, and they announced that they had plans to do this, and they made it sound like they were going to do, which they're now living up to their promise, most of them. But at that one, it was they promised the sun, the moon, and the stars is going to be state of the art, blah, blah, blah. And at that meeting, we asked them about the access road, because at that time, Noble had some wells back here that had been in there for probably about 15 years. And the access road was about halfway up the hill on 71st, which is kind of dangerous. You'll see it's kind of a steep hill. They said they were searching for a different access road at that time. So then, come the second public meeting, they announced that they had found a different access site. But they didn't tell me. It was 35 foot from my bedroom. I found that out actually from one of the city people, the city, I got such a long story. How do I?
She
how do
really
I
does.
condense
I
it?
know it is.
No, we can make it. We can
Okay,
figure it out.
16 years ago, the city told us they were going to take our property by eminent domain when 71st Avenue
Okay.
was widened. Checked with them every year. They made it sound like it was going to happen within a couple of years. So we get an attorney, the whole ball of wax right away.
Sure.
Well, it doesn't happen. So every year we would check with them. I lost my husband in October 14th in 2012. So about a year after I lost him, I contacted them to see, because I couldn't plan, because I
Yeah.
didn't know what they were going to do. And that opened discussions at first, because the bike trail ends on the opposite side of the bridge.
Okay.
On my side, I own both sides of Sheepdraw Creek. So they wanted to know if I would sell them the north end of my property. What they said was they had changed the design of the road. It was no longer going to be 4-lane. It was going down to 3-lane, so they wouldn't be taking the property.
I'm going to get a
Which
map.
really-
So it'd be helpful to you.
Yeah.
It was pretty aggravating at that point because we didn't do what we wanted to do with the property because they kept telling us they were going to tear everything
Sure.
down. So then they wanted to buy the north end, and I said, absolutely not. You've already let my property devalue. Now you want to take the creek. You don't find too many properties in city limits with a live creek, which is a big part of my value. I said, no, I'm not selling. Well, when we were annexed in the city 6 years ago, the neighbor on the other side of the creek donated land for that trail in order for him to get his horse property approved in city limits. Then he sells it. I don't know if he didn't tell the guy who lives there now that he had donated this land to the city, but when he finds out, he goes ballistic. He doesn't want it next to his pasture, next to his corrals. Calls, leaves me nasty messages. I never even met him, and I'm like, called and said, I'm sorry if this wasn't disclosed to you, but this is a done deal. So then the city kept pushing. They kept coming back and saying, what would it take for us to make you happy? And right about that time is when I found out that they had approved this access road 35 foot from my bedroom. So I got the document number and I went into Web Public Records, pulled the information up, and what the document shows, they went to my neighbor. They bought this strip, I believe it's 60 by 90, whatever it is, for $610,000 and told her it was for access back here for a residential acreage subdivision that they had planned. 1 month later, Extraction announced they had a new access road, and lo and behold, that was the access road. So this was all, I felt, done behind my back. I sat across the table from city people many times, never said a word.
Sure.
Extraction never once has contacted me until after this whole thing started going. I'd never heard from Extraction. We had one meeting with Colorado Oil and Gas that 2 of their guys from Extraction were there, and I got pretty heated that day, probably the worst I ever have been, because I asked him, why in the world wouldn't you have come and talked to me? And he said, we don't have time to knock on people's doors. I said, you had time to talk to my next door neighbor, but you couldn't walk next door and tell me what was going on. I said, I have the most frontage on 71st Avenue than any property on the whole thing. Why in the world wouldn't you have talked to me where you would have had a safe turn off instead of what they have, as you'll see? The truck, most of them, some of the guys can make the turn, but most of them have to pull into oncoming lane to make that turn. It's just a really stupid place to put the access road. So the city tells me that it was either Mineral Resources or Extraction that wanted that access road there. Extraction has told me that they had given the city 6 different sites, and the city said, put it here. And this is when I was still in talk with the city about what to do with my property. So as it ended up, because I have that access road right there, now they're going to do 71st. They're taking extra frontage from me, more than any other property on 71st. And when I said, why are you doing this, which puts it 1.5 foot from my front porch, what they're taking, I could never sell to anybody.
Yeah,
Nobody
totally.
would ever buy it. So basically they forced my hand to sell to them. I have a life estate, so I can live there the rest of my life if I choose, on the house. And then there's a 3-car garage. But the pasture and all that, they're supposed to maintain now. Now what they pulled on me, we've actually closed on the property. Didn't get what I should have got for the property. The appraiser told me the minute that access road went in, it devalued it $100,000. And the minute
The
the
access
well
road
site
they
went
approved.
in, it devalued another 25%. And the same with all these homes that back up to it. You know, immediate devaluation of 25%. So, get it closed and everything. And one of the things I worked out with him was the life estate, and the other thing I had asked them for was a letter from my insurance company on file, because I have to pay maintenance on the house and the 3-car garage, that all claims with the check would be made to me, since I'm paying for everything, the insurance and everything. City did it. We get closed. I had to have surgery the end of March. A week after I get home from surgery, I get a letter, an email from the city saying, we need you to add us to the insurance. And I wrote back and said, no, I'm not adding you to the insurance unless you want to pay half the policy, half the deductible, and half of the maintenance. I'm not doing it. Well, I don't know if it's retaliation or what, but the pasture, they had told me they wouldn't mow as often as I normally do, which you'll see. I mean, it just looks horrible right now. And 2 weeks ago, I had 2 guys from the city out looking at, I've got these 120-year-old cottonwoods around the house, and that's also part of the deal I cut, is they have to take care of the trees.
Sure.
And so they were out looking at the trees, and so I went out, introduced myself to this young guy, and I said, so when will you guys be doing the first mowing on the pasture? He said, we're not mowing it. I said, excuse me? He said, we're not mowing it. And I said, well, that's not what I was told. Andy told me that you wouldn't mow as often, but as soon as it went to seed, you guys would be mowing. He said, we have no plans to mow it. I said, ever? He said, ever. But I've written back to the head of Parks and Rec and said, what's the deal? This wasn't the agreement. I still haven't heard back from him.
So as far as like, it seems like in your situation, the city's working for these companies more than they're working for the residents.
The city
Is that kind of the
really
feeling?
is beholden to the oil and gas industry.
Sure.
I guess is the appropriate, is the polite way of stating it.
Yes, it is.
When this first came up, it has to go through several layers. The first organization that it goes through is the Greeley Planning Commission. So we presented to them, and they voted unanimously to turn the project down. Yay!
And you guys thought you won.
Life is good.
Yeah.
So obviously there are appeals. So the next appeal is to the city council. City council voted for it 5-2. So if you compare who the people are and what their objectives are, the city, the planning commission members are all appointed by the city council, but they have no obligations to anyone. They're not being reelected. They're not running for reelection. They don't have to get solicit funds, anything like that an elected official does. But so they are able to vote based on the merits of the case.
Sure.
And unanimously they said this is too big a project for this location, and as well as a lot of other reasons. So we went before the city council, and the mayor especially ended up turning that meeting into a judgment of property rights, mineral rights, which is a sacred thing in the West.
Oh,
So if someone's extracting minerals from under your property, then you get payments for the rest of your life, I guess. I'm not, it depends. So he turned that into a decision based on mineral rights rather than on the use by special review, which is how it's supposed to be decided. And very briefly, the use by special review has 5 different criteria. If you don't meet one of those 5, then the project is void. And one of those 5 says, and this is a quote, there shall be no hindrance on traffic or parking in the neighborhood. No impediment. So it's not a quote, but that's it. Basically, this project can have no effect on traffic.
But there's an access road and...
And I mean, they're turning out from this site with large trucks onto 71st Avenue. 71st Avenue here, within the course of the next year, they're going to remove and replace the bridge at the bottom of the sheep draw bridge. And then they're going to take this entire maybe half-mile section, three-quarter-mile section from 20th over to 10th, almost from just past 20th to almost 10th, and they're going to totally tear that out and replace it, which is what Dawn was referring to, all the changes that are going to affect her property and the rights-of-way. So it's going to be a zoo. And it's so obvious it's not even worth laughing at. But that, of course, passed also. So everyone there in some way or other has, not everyone, but a lot of the city council members, of course, have some relationship to the oil and gas industry, whether they have been previously employed there, whether they have accepted money for campaigns, and they all more or less acknowledged that when they were going around giving their votes. They'd always start out with a couple of sentences of explanation, and then they'd say, "Therefore, I did this." Well, it was amazing. There were probably 3 out of the 5 people who voted the project up who said things like, "I have never had such a tough time with a project. I've lost sleep over this. I just wish it weren't so huge, and I just wish it weren't so intense." Those are magic words in the USR. I mean, it can't be too intense for the area. It can't be too big for the area. I mean, these people are saying, "I just wish it weren't, but I'm voting for it."
Because oil and gas, or whatever.
Because it's oil and gas. Yeah. I mean, oil and gas in the Denver-Julesburg field here is, which goes pretty much from a little south of Greeley on up toward Cheyenne. It's huge. It's the second most productive field in play, they refer to it, in the country. There's one called the Permian Field in Texas, which is a little bit more lucrative. But insofar as Colorado's concerned, it's all right here. So Greeley and Weld County are making big money from, I'm assuming, royalty payments, but also their employment is amazing here. So lots of people are moving here. Lots of people are spending money, so it's good for the tax base. It's definitely financially an amazing deal for the city and the county. So their perspective is, how could we turn it down? And so they don't. I mean, they have never, between them and the COGCC, I don't think they've ever rejected an oil and gas project, ever. So, at any rate,
yeah.
Quick break just to give you a reference as to where we are.
You can video that if you want. That'd probably be cool.
So this is north,
Okay.
that away, and we are in this house right here.
Okay.
And this is a previous drawing of what the sound wall was going to look like here and here. As you can see, it goes, at least 3 times as far down here now.
Okay.
But you can see here's the location of the